that's why the co-op model, I think, is so beautiful, and I think can be replicated. I mean, it is replicated outside the service industry, but within the service industry, if you can't make a living wage because your boss isn't paying you and the state's not making him, then you can just come together with your coworkers. And I honestly believe, like, you can do it. Like, if you stick together and you work really hard, you can be in charge of your lives again, if you want to. Like, but doing it alone out here is tough because none of us really have what it takes to be alone, but together, it's a different story.
Welcome to the Brew. Today we have a very special live episode. We're joined by Kelley Bader, and we're going to be talking about the Augies Union. But before we get started, for today's episode, the co-founder of Free Logic Media, Nick Hill, is unable to join us today. Oh, we don't have the video? Never mind. We're not going to go to this section. We're going to go straight to our topics.
Just know though.
Just know that he's not here today as he was feeling a little bit sick. We are live streaming this on LinkedIn as well. Since we are live streaming this on LinkedIn, it's on his account. We just kind of wanted to bring up that he's not here today, but it doesn't matter because we're going to have a great topic. We're going to get right into it. But
absolutely.
Luis, you can actually take it away with the very first question.
Sweet. For those of you that don't know who we have sitting in front of us, Kelley. He, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were like very much like the part of the initial kind of group of people that started and was a part of creating the union. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Tell me about like what the process was like for you to create it.
I think first let's talk about what is Augie's coffee. I think that's actually step one, and then we can go into
that actually might be a good one.
Origin stories.
Yeah. Who killed Uncle Ben?
Augie's Coffee is, as it sounds, a coffee shop in an empire. Augie's been around for like 10, I think 11 years at this point. Yeah. I came into Augie's like 6.5 years ago, so right as Augie's was like beginning like the initial expanding steps, we'd I think just opened a Riverside store, and then we're looking to open like a store in Claremont, and then I think a couple of years after that did one in Temecula. So it was like kind of branching out, coffee shop with like a big online base, cool merchandise, cool branding, like really got the social media game down, so yeah. Just your normal, third wave roaster coffee shop type of deal.
And then transition right into that first question that Luis was asking is now going into what is the Augies Union and how to get started.
Yeah, the Augies Union is a coalition of workers that worked at Augies. And we basically got started after the pandemic had kind of started out and things had kind of been more or less like kind of like crumbling a little bit within the business. Which, and that kind of happened in a lot of ways, but mostly what was happening was there was this root issue of this, just this distance between like management that all worked in the warehouse and all the workers, and a lot of miscommunication and a lot of misunderstanding, and some of the consequences were like bad, like some people were having a hard time keeping their jobs, and some of them were just like, we need masks, like we need protection, like we need to be heard. Super basic stuff, you know what I mean? But it was generally coming down to like, there's no good way to communicate between the stores and between management, and sort of the big like tipping point for us taking steps about that was we had some workers that decided to leave Augies for a while until things became safer. They're like, we don't have masks, we don't have protection, this is a pandemic and we've never been in anything like this, so we're gonna stay home and like take care and come back when it's safe, So they stayed home a month or 2 months, and then they tried to come back, and Augies was more or less telling them like, you're not coming back, like, we're replacing you, you know what I mean? Like, we've had people come in and cover your shifts, we've like worked really hard to like keep the shops open, and like, see you later, like, no thanks, And that's when I was kind of starting to get really concerned about all of this stuff that was kind of deteriorating between like our relation with management. And so I just called management and I said, hey, look, this is messed up. Like, this sucks. You told these people they can come back. I think it's really unethical if you don't let them come back. And so they kind of worked out this thing where they were like, if you want to give up shifts, or if there's room on the schedule for them to come back, they can come back and like cover, the shifts that you guys don't want to get them. So we all worked together, got some shifts covered, got these people their jobs back, and it was great. And that was kind of what started it. We were like, if we work together, like if we do this and just continue talking with management, we can just work together and decide how to take care of our jobs, you know?
Yeah.
And at that point, someone was like, that's a union. That's a labor union.
Yeah.
Just do that. It's your right, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what it was born out of. It was pretty much born out of like COVID circumstances, you know?
Gotcha. So I mean, looking back, I think even looking back like long term, right? Before COVID and everything like that, were there any, like, now that you're kind of out of it, hindsight kind of thing, was there any moments that you kind of saw as like red flags that you maybe then during the time you attributed more to like, oh, this is just, you know, oh, just a company? Or was it like COVID, like literally like that was like a weird shift in management?
It kind of, it's a little bit of both. I think COVID exacerbates everything a little bit, and it makes you kind of see through the stuff that you usually are able to ignore, you know, or like kind of like redirect into like some way of framing it in a positive way. But it is like hindsight at this point makes it really apparent, like, oh my God, like there was some like messed up stuff the whole time, and so much of it is just kind of normal food service stuff, you know? Like the whole idea of like, and we've talked about this a lot before as a union, but the whole idea of like we're a family or like we're a small business, you know, is itself really messed up. Like we're not a family. Like this isn't a paternal situation. You know what I mean? Like I'm not inclined to do things for you without getting compensated just because we're close. You know what I mean? So there's this whole mentality that started to just look like really like creepy, like just not good, you know? But there's a couple other things. Like back in the day, they had a GoFundMe to basically like help with the costs of moving, and that GoFundMe was like,
I contributed to that GoFundMe.
Yeah, a lot of my friends did. A lot of people I know, because they were like, they said it was for you guys. Like they said, like you're gonna be out of work for a little bit, like it's gonna help you guys in the move. And we never saw any of that money, and I remember bringing it up, and management was just like, you know, like the build out for the new shop like wasn't cheap, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, you should have just told the public, you know what I mean? You shouldn't have told us that you were gonna take care of us and then not. So it's just all these little things that I was like, okay, like, you know, I trust you, like good faith all the way. Just kind of like all fell apart, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that kind of speaks on the next thing, which is just like when it was just a shift in like everyone's kind of mental thinking when COVID hit. It was either a sort of it honestly seems like a fight or flight kind of feeling that ended up happening with a lot of everybody, management, including employees, where it's just like, and I mean, obviously so. Like when it first hit and stuff started shutting down, you had this like reaction from, I think, the U.S. in general. It was just like it was hitting the fan. Like it was like we're all gonna die. We need to panic. We need to panic right now. Like, and there was no real like sane voice telling us, it's gonna be all right, we just need to do X, Y, and Z. It was just like someone just like throwing toilet paper up in the air.
Free for
and
all.
like,
Literally toilet paper.
Toilet paper.
I mean, literally, like we had people coming into the store. I had customers back to back the first week telling me like, this is crazy, like this is all fake and made up. And I was like, yeah, sure, I don't think so, but like whatever, you know. And then literally the next person would come in and be like, you need to leave right now and go to the store and grab as much as you can or you'll die. Like it's gonna get bad, you know? And that like whiplash of like, does anybody know what's happening? This just feels like the end of the world and people are freaking out, you know? And that, you're totally right. That was definitely like a wear on our psyche, and I think management's too, you know?
Yeah, and I think that actually really does put the shining light on like how a company is organized in the first place, because in a disaster situation, you have to really quickly react, right?
Absolutely.
So it really showcases the bad of companies, and it showcases the good of companies, and it really showcases what is your values as a business, what are you trying to push forward as an organization, what are you trying to protect, where does your brand image come from, all those things. Like it's complicated, and I think that's the one thing with COVID that I wish people were more open about, is it's not black and white. It's not like they're in the right, they're in the wrong. It's more as in there's this huge gray zone, but it's a balance of that, and it's pushing people more to the good side. But it's complicated. There's so many factors.
It's complicated, and there's all this negotiating that needs to take place. You know, like there's complications about the complexity of like what happens when disaster happens, and typically the natural response is like self-preservation. You know, and that's like a really gracious way, I think, of looking at it, is like, oh yeah, people are just trying to protect themselves, you know, and that's normal, or that's like a fight or flight, like lizard brain response. But you're totally right. Like it's not, you know, black and white, and it's not really the time to go straight into like, we need to like look out for ourselves and like protect ourselves at all costs. Like you just need to negotiate through these things together, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Mike Tyson that said it. What was it? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was our football slogan. We're going to the football field.
Everyone has a plan until they get
punched in the
knocked.
butt. Yep.
You know, and it's something that it's with everybody. And I think this whole thing just kind of put that in like a very palpable like sense for the whole country. It's like, all right, you might have a plan, but the minute we got rocked, it was like, okay, actually we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it actually showed like generally in a business you're supposed to have 3 months of payroll, like just like flowing like capital.
Yeah.
And what it showed me right when COVID hit, like all these companies were getting so comfortable with a growing economy that they were reinvesting all their capital right away, which is, don't get me wrong, that's aggressive growth. But what happens is that you don't know what's going to happen next exactly in the situation. And it really showed for me, like a majority of companies, how aggressively they've been trying to grow. 24-hour fitness, all these companies, like, you think they're massive brands, but like during COVID hit, they had to close a massive amount of stores because they were over-investing into their growth.
Wow. Yeah. I never really thought about it that way. And that's the thing, is like I don't really have the brain of a business owner at this point. You know, like I'm learning how it works, but it definitely seems like, you know, hard to navigate, and when the time comes to make hard decisions, it's not easy, you know, and part of where we're coming from is like, it's not easy. We need to talk about it because it's our lives too. You know what I mean? Like everything that you're having a hard time with is me. You know, like that's my ability to make a living.
Absolutely. So kind of moving forward a little bit. One thing that I definitely want to talk about here is when like I think all stores closed, and then vast majority, or all coffee shops closed, and then vast majority of the workers, right, something like 85% or something like that.
Yeah.
Got laid off within like the snap of a finger.
Yeah.
You know, did that come as like a whole shit kind of moment, or
it
was like straight out of nowhere?
Out of nowhere. I mean,
wow.
Out of nowhere because in part, well, okay, so the way it happened was a week before the mass layoffs and the closures, we had a town hall meeting, you know, where we had told management, like, we've all signed union cards, like 85% of us, like we're all in union mode, you know, like we're doing this, you know, so we want to talk about it with you, see what we can do with this. So we had a big town hall where we all showed up and we all just said, yeah, like we think things could change and we want a union because we think that would be the best way to negotiate and get in writing the changes that we think we all kind of need, you know. And then a week later, everybody got a mass email that said, we're laying off the entire staff, closing all the retail stores. You can pick up your last paycheck tomorrow, you know?
Wow.
And
Everybody.
this happened on America's birthday, right?
It happened on the 4th of July. It did. It did happen on the 4th of July. I forget that sometimes. The irony. But part of why it was so shocking was because we had been learning about our rights and learning about unions for a long time.
Yeah.
And at every union meeting that we had when we were trying to organize, we were like, don't worry, you can't get fired. It's illegal. You know what I mean? And then we got fired, you know? So.
Yeah, man. There's a lot I want to say.
Yeah, no, me too.
Okay. I mean, so kind of just a quick little talking point here is, like, kind of talking on that, like, you know, just real snap of a finger getting kind of laid off. It's like, I mean, it's gotta just feel some kind of way. Like you've literally like, you've blood, sweat, and tears is one way to describe it. You know, you say you were in there for 6 years, assisted in a big way building this brand, this family, like they said, and then like just boom, it's gone, it's over.
It's just gone.
What is it? I literally can't in my brain process like how that must have felt. Honestly,
it did feel a lot of different ways. You know, like there was a lot of like mixed personal feelings, and then there's also a lot of weird, I think for me too, a lot of like responsible feelings, you know, because like I said, like I had been telling like all my coworkers, like, don't worry, like we can't get fired, you know, like they they couldn't do it because it's illegal, and if they did, they would have massive repercussions, you know. And now, looking back, I'm like, you know, anybody can do anything, you know what I mean? Like, there was no guarantee that we were safe, and I just felt this responsibility, you know, like I had got all these people to do this thing and told them, like, this is gonna, like, make our lives better if we come together and we work together. And along with just my personal, like, you know, like, grief about losing, like, my job and, like, what felt like home and my community, you know, there was, like, this, like, disappointment that I, like, let these people down, you know. And I think I'm still kind of, like, grappling with that as, like, our case is moving forward, you know. I'm like, I need the system to work for us, just because I need to know that, like, there is some goodness out there, like there is something that works for workers, that is meant to protect workers, you know, and that I wasn't just being idealistic or like pie in the sky, you know, but this could, like, you know, workers can have protection. But it was like, the shock of it was instantly, like, I remember, like, I'm furious, I'm like grieving, I'm like so disappointed and guilty and, like, all these things, you know. And it took a long time to work out all of those feelings, you know. And I think some of it is working out, but I feel pretty level-headed, you know. Like, I feel like what happened is, like, pretty crazy, but it was, you know, always a possibility. And we've done a lot to, like, keep together and keep moving forward. And I'm mostly just feeling this, like, peace and this, like, pride and, like, just this solidarity, like, God, solidarity. I know it's a buzzword, but, like, it really does feel like community, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good.
And I mean, before we kind of jump into the next topic, but one thing I would just bring up and kind of demystify for a lot of people that might be listening right now is there's a lot of conversations between, like, business owners, right, and employees. Like, there's always this kind of weird conversation about, like, well, the employees are pushing it, so now the business can't grow and all these things, before we even talk about, like, the pros and cons of unions. But, like, the one thing I think people really need to understand is something called capital gains or equity, right? As a worker, you don't have equity in the business, you get capital out of the business. They pay you a paycheck, which is great, but you don't have ownership of the growth of the business.
Right.
The business owners do.
Yeah.
So they take the risk up front, but they get the long-term gains out of everything else that happens in between. The employees are what drive that growth.
Right.
And especially a community-oriented business, as Augies is and was, the important thing there is that your face is why people walked into the store and bought the coffee. So, I mean, strategy terminology-wise, like, that's bad strategy if the one thing that makes an organization unique is employees, and you mistreat them. I just have to throw that out there as a business owner ourselves. Like, that's a bad approach, just in general. Like, let's not talk about, like, all the other stuff that happened. Just that alone is a bad approach, because your value has come from the employees. Your value has come from the brand image that has been created from the community tie. And you sever that as a business, it limits everything else you try to do. Everything else.
And that's a really good point too, because I think even that would play into, like, you know, the idea of, like, self-interest, you know, which is, like, unfortunate but a reality, you know. And I always felt like if even if the bosses are self-interested, like, greedy capitalists, like, dogs, you know what I mean? Like, it's in their own interest to, like, take care of their workers, because we are growing their business for them, you know, like, underneath their supervision, underneath the umbrella of, you know, the capital that they've set up and the business that they've, like, initiated. But, like, we've built it just by like our labor, you know what I mean? And, like, it is definitely in your interest to, like, consider that the reality, you know, and treat it as such. And I think that is something that I kind of think it's shifting. I think that COVID is making a lot of people look at that a little bit differently, and not just with, you know, the rhetoric of, like, essential workers. Like, I really think that business owners are, like, as they're getting squeezed and trying to make their businesses, you know, profitable and lasting and sustainable, I think they're realizing, like, oh, this is always been collaborative, and how everybody is treated and worked together is all collaborating to make the business successful or not successful.
Absolutely.
You know?
And actually, one of the biggest expenses for a business, which tends to be ignored, is training new employees.
Yeah.
So by having retention, it's actually cheaper for a business than training and hiring, because of market knowledge, how they operate as a business, the synergies, the productivity, all those factors. So I think it's just like, there's so much politics, all these things that kind of go into it, but, like, like I said, it's not just black and white. It's complicated, but you have to talk about it and understand all sides of the equation, all the different factors that have to go with it. And as a business, you have to look at how am I getting to my 10-year vision, not as in like, what is my P&L sheet this month? Like, that's important. You got to make a profit. Don't get me wrong, but like you're most likely still making the profit. So it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. I mean, for me to like rationalize it in my brain, it's like immediately, like when I saw this thing happening, I was just like, I was like, what are they doing? I was like, all of their entire brand, like, and it's the funny thing you run into a lot with businesses. I mean, it's, you run into the situation where the easiest one is like, you don't know who your actual customer is. Like, that's like the biggest one you'll end up finding. Like, people don't understand who their actual customer is. And then, but the second one is like, the owners of the business are so like deep in like the vat of Kool-Aid that they've created that they can't like see any which way that isn't like that, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And what ends up happening is like, you start to put value on things that the value has no purpose on being there. So like, you start to value the brand, and you start to value, you know, the P&L sheet. So that's like your god. It's like, oh, where's my profit? Where's my loss? All this stuff, all this money. But you forget, really, at the end of the day, the biggest asset to a business is the human capital. Like, that is the source. That's the blood that makes everything flow. Some businesses, maybe it's a bigger share. Maybe like, you know, if you're working for like an accounting agency, for like, you know, it has like, it's, people have their value there. But when you're working at a coffee shop,
service industry,
specifically, it's like, that is like 90% of what you're doing. A good server, a good barista is gonna make or break whether or not you go back to that place.
Totally.
They're the marketers of the business. So like, if they, like, let's say you have a business and you have a marketing expense, right? Like, technically you should budget some of that marketing expense for your employees and teach them how to articulate the brand value and the messaging of the business, because that's going to grow your business 100 times more than you sending an advertisement out that doesn't resonate with people and doesn't have that personal touch to it.
And it almost like deepens the irony of how poorly service workers are treated. Like, because everything you're saying is true. Like, it's so true, but at the same time, like, I recently did a ton of research through all these academic papers and studies about like service industry workers and statistics, and they're dismal. It's really, really bad, you know, about their treatment, their mental health, their compensation. And they really are like the business, you know, like the business is undertaken by service workers, you know, who are just making these people money, who only think about their brand, only think about like literally like this little like thing that they're like, this is my baby and I created it, and like you are all also part of my baby. Like, it's like it's just this weird like paternalistic, capitalistic, like, I am in charge of everything and you serve me. And I'm like, that has to change. Even if you want to keep being greedy, you have to change that, you know, like this isn't sustainable. I don't think, you know.
No, and I would be inclined to agree with you on, like, especially with the way that, hopefully, the way things are looking and the way kind of mental viewpoints are shifting through the U.S. and I think that it's finally catching up to some parts of Europe, in a good way. I think that as time goes, you're going to see that. You're going to see, one, it's like right now you're seeing a big resurgence in small business, for one. Tie that to now you're seeing a resurgence in understanding that people are people and they're not just a thing that makes you money. You know, like, that's huge. Like the fact that back in the day, you think like, you know, you had like this like career where like it doesn't matter what your career is, but that's like your career, and you would just be like, that's it. My job is to go there, clock in, clock out. I'm done. Whereas now you're starting to get this appreciation for work, or you're starting to get this kind of, you know, you clock in, clock out, but what do you do there? Are you happy with what you're doing there? Is it fulfilling to you? It's a change that's happening in the U.S. It's starting, obviously, it's grassroots, now it's growing. But it's an exciting thing to see, especially like I know my biggest like factor for growth, and I think the thing that I look at the most, especially within our business, is happiness. Like, that's my biggest thing. It's like, are you happy as the worker right now? Because if you're not happy, then the work that you're outputting is probably not going to be the best, and if the work's not the best and the output's not the best, and it all goes back to the holy, like, how much money are we making? But it's like, at the end of the day, like, that's going to happen, that's fine over there, let that exist over there, the money will come. People don't just come and go. People have to
quality
be
people, especially.
Quality people, especially. Yeah, absolutely. Quality people don't just come and go. It's not something that people just grow on trees. You know? It's like you have to value it. You have to really put the effort into to value them. And I think that that's honestly like a nice segue into the next kind of question here is like, now that you have this group of people who are, in my opinion, like very much like talented people within that industry, talk to me about the new co-op that you're starting about.
Yeah, so we have been moving forward with the co-op. We've kind of like kept the details a little bit quiet because there's more involved than we're like able to just be like, this is it, and this is happening, this is what it looks like, you know.
Absolutely.
But basically announcing the co-op is just letting everybody know, like, we've been thinking for a very long time about what is the best way to move forward, and what is like really like winning in a sense of like taking care of ourselves and our workers, and building something that is also like influencing and, you know, encouraging the well-being of other workers. You know, like, how do we really accomplish that as a long-term goal? And for a long time we weren't really sure. You know, it's like we would love to go back to work with a union contract, you know, and I think in a lot of ways like we're still open to that, you know. But the co-op was basically it was becoming born out of like so many things are happening. Like the Amentos are like the family and the business is just putting up with so much and ignoring us the whole time, and we unfortunately like can't like wait it out forever, you know what I mean? Like we have to pay our bills, and we can't right now. So like the co-op is something we've been talking about, and it was more or less, we stayed away from it because we weren't sure like how can we pay for everybody to work at a co-op, you know. And now from the pop-ups and sort of like some strategies we've come up with to like kind of hit the ground running with a lot of different areas, I think we finally have a way that we've worked out on paper, like this is how we can actually do it. And so we're starting to move forward. We've filed papers of like incorporation, and we got a name that we're gonna be sharing soon, and like working on some design, and like basically just kind of generating like our 1-year plan, our 1-year costs, and like kind of a model that we can sustain over a year, and kind of figuring it out from there.
Awesome. Yeah, man, that's super exciting. So I'm sure that, you know, all the naming and everything like that, you want to keep it hush hush until you can announce it on IG. I completely understand. But kind of one thing that I do want to ask is, like, as far as like what you as a group kind of want to get to the community, like what do you want to give back to the community with the startup, with the with the co-op, excuse me.
It's a startup.
I mean,
totally.
What do you want to kind of, what do you want your multiple questions here, but what do you want like your place in the community to be, and how do you want to like obviously improve the community that you're going to be in? And then just kind of touching on that as well, is like what's your ideal outcome? You know, what's your ideal outcome with your 1 year? Which
is a great question. You know, as far as like community involvement, that's like kind of the thing we talk about the most. I think maybe even more than coffee, you know, because like we know
well, you know coffee.
We know coffee, and we're there's a lot to figure out with the startup, but I think it's more or less like we know coffee. Like we know how coffee shops work. Like we know how to make it work. Like
you made them run.
We made them run. Yeah. Like we've done everything from roasting to like drink development to, so like we're just gonna do that part. But the bigger dream and like the bigger ideas, like, you know, Augies really was a community space, you know, and it really was like, whether or not people were interacting directly, like there was something felt when you were there, and there was something between everybody that I think was really like resonant of a community. And I think that wasn't even that intentional. Like I think it was us like working hard to develop relationships and like just caring about the people that we live with. Absolutely. But I think there's more that you can do, like if we really start a co-op that its structure is like communicating this value of like equity, and the structure itself is like, you know, there's not a hierarchy here, like we're all contributing to the success of this business, you know, and like basically take that same intentionality of the structure and be like, yo, if you're here and you're in the shop, you want to be a part of this, like let's talk, you know, like let's talk about our community, like let's talk about like our local government, and talk about like what we're doing when like shit hits the fan in scenarios like COVID, you know what I mean? And kind of figure out like how we can get the Inland Empire to like prosper a little bit more, you know, like how can we take care of workers at large, you know? And so there's a lot of ways that we want to use like a co-op or a building as like just like a meeting hall, you know, like to talk about these issues, and basically take the idea that like we're not just a community because of proximity, like this is an open community. If you want to be involved and you want to talk, or you want to share, or you want to collaborate on, political endeavors or community outreach in terms of like food banks or anything like that, like let's use our space and our co-op as a model to just generate community like involvement and unity and kind of all these things,
Absolutely.
So, and that's a lot of like more or less abstract rhetoric, but
Yeah.
I think we're trying to figure out like how do we facilitate dialogue, and how do we turn that into action, and what do we want to accomplish, but
Absolutely. I think that's awesome, because I think the one major thing that's happened because of COVID is honestly small businesses have shrunk quite drastically. Corporations now actually make a majority of the U.S. economy, while before it was small businesses made up the majority of the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
So it's been shrinking, it's been pushing it down, but community really wants to support those small businesses.
Totally.
And I think if there was more community ties to everybody winning out of one thing I've learned is a lot of times when people talk about entrepreneurship, they talk about there's only one way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very false, because for example, unions and co-ops and collectives tied in with entrepreneurship, I think those can actually work really well together. What I mean by that is creating systems where the employees that create a brand, it generally this works better for service industry. Very hard for product. It just doesn't really work. But service industry, those that work on something together in a collective all reap the benefits of the capital gains that come out of it, the income that comes out of it. And you get paid a very transparent sum of like what your productivity is up front. But then whatever is made on top of that, the employees reap the benefits of it. It just makes sense, because what that does is now you as an employee have a stake in that. So you're going to want to build it and grow it. And that's honestly down to the line of entrepreneurship. Really, an entrepreneurship is you're having a vision, you're prospering to that vision, and you get a team behind it, and you all push towards that and enable it. So I love it, because it's honestly, I think that's more modern entrepreneurship, and it changes the discourse a little bit about being entrepreneurship all about building the next billion-dollar company. It doesn't have to be that. It's more of societal impact you can create out of it.
How can we have good lives? How can we make other lives better,
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I think you're definitely like tugging on our heartstrings when you say that you want to like bring overall growth into the IE and stuff like that, because like very much like our mission statement is that. It's like our mission statement from the get-go was like we want to like why, I mean, if you want to like boil it down to like one sentence, is like why those cities. It's like our kind of thing. It's like everything that exists in like LA, everything that exists in SF, Boston, where these big hubs of like tech and entrepreneurship and growth and honestly even community, you know, it's like you have this stuff happening in those big cities, and then you have like these like more inland cities that are just like, oh, nothing can happen there. Like it's like impossible for it to happen. Like there's so much talent within the Inland Empire. Like disregarding Riverside for a second, just in the Inland Empire. There's a massive amount of talent. So why not here? You know, why not grow something here in the Inland Empire that's going to allow for, you know, maybe even like a generation or two to prosper in a way that they hadn't had the opportunity to before. And I think that, I mean, come on, it's like, why not? You know, like who's gonna say, oh, it's a bad idea? Like no one is. Everyone's gonna be bought into that, because it's why not? You know, like and I think it hits us. I think most of us here pretty deep, but it's like, you know, we graduate from UCR, and the thing that you're told, or when you graduate from anywhere here, honestly, the thing you're told is like, all right, when are you gonna go to the big city? When are you gonna go to LA?
I know.
When are you gonna go to OC? When are you gonna go to San Diego? And it's like, okay, but what is here for me, or what can I build here? It isn't really a conversation that's had that often.
It's, I mean, the same. I feel like my whole life has been a lot of like people moving away and being like, when are you gonna move? Or like, you know, and I've always been like, to what, you know, and they're like, we're not moving to anywhere, we're moving away from here, you know. I'm like, but
why?
But this is your home, you know, like you don't have to, like you can do right by it, you know, or like anything that you think you want to do somewhere else, I promise your home needs it too. And this home needs it, you know, like this home needs people to stay and to do stuff to make it better and to watch it grow. And I think you're right, like, you know, like graduating UCR, and then now like moving into grad school, there's this idea that like, you know, especially when I talk to like my parents or I talk to other people, you know, they're like, if you go to college and you work hard, you can go anywhere and do anything, you know. And I'm like, I don't buy it anymore.
It's not true anymore.
I went to college. We like a ton of my coworkers went to college, you know. I'm now in grad school, and like my prospects aren't looking good after that either, you know what I mean? So like you just have to find the people in your home and try something. You just have to do something to make your lives work, because no one out there is making it work for you. You know?
I think there's going to be a massive wave of, honestly, entrepreneurship in the Inland Empire, because we have everything we need here to make that successful. But what it really requires is taking away these silos and combining everything, creating a community, an ecosystem, synergies between organizations, having founders help other founders, having these kind of conversations. That is so important, because it can't be done individually. Nobody's going to change Riverside by themselves.
Right. And that's I think so true about the Inland Empire in particular, is like where we're from, like there's not a lot of like, we need each other. Like we need a safety net, because we don't have capital safety nets. Like we're not in high wealthy areas, you know, or like high income areas, you know. And so like the ability to be a sole entrepreneur is not that strong here, because like none of us just have the money to go and buy a business and then just start making money, you know what I mean? But that's why the co-op model, I think, is so beautiful, and I think can be replicated. I mean, it is replicated outside the service industry, but within the service industry, if you can't make a living wage because your boss isn't paying you and the state's not making him, then you can just come together with your coworkers. And I honestly believe like you can do it. Like if you stick together and you work really hard, you can be in charge of your lives again, you know, if you want to, like, you know. But doing it alone out here is tough, because none of us really have what it takes to be alone. But together, it's a different story, you know.
I mean, I don't think I individually could do everything that Free Logic Media does. I mean, I don't know about you, Val, but you know, it's like
I mean, I'm already barely sleeping, so absolutely not.
Yeah, like a whole team in here, you know what I mean? Like this is how stuff happens.
We got one question in the chat, which is like, will the Inland Empire become the next Silicon Valley? And I mean, my take on that whole thing is it has the potential to become a micro Silicon Valley. I don't think it ever will become a Silicon Valley, and the reason why is just it doesn't have the same interest level for tech growth, but it has the pretty much when Silicon Valley started, it looked like Riverside. So what I mean by that is commercial real estate was cheaper, rent was cheaper. It had a university. We have UCR. We have good universities here. We have Redlands. We have CBU. We have a bunch of universities. CSUSB actually just created a school of entrepreneurship. So like these things are happening in the IE, but people aren't talking about them. But the only difference between Silicon Valley and Riverside, as I talked about, was the ecosystem. It was built there. You had a bunch of founders of like Atari was kind of like why Silicon Valley even became Silicon Valley, to be honest, gaming industry. And because of that, it was kind of like a hit, fun place that an engineer can go and wear, you know, flip-flops and jeans to work, and you don't have to wear a suit. And everybody loved that idea.
Right.
And I think Riverside honestly has that same vibe. I think that if it's younger generations that come up, you don't have to dress all fancy. You can just do your work, be good at it, create your reputation around it, work together. Honestly, I think the Riverside has the potential of becoming like a micro Silicon Valley with tech spurring up and ideas spurring up, but it does require that kind of that coalition to like make it happen. I mean, I don't know much about Silicon Valley except that it is the tech hub of like the world, you know. And I think what I would hope, because from what I understand about Silicon Valley, it's a lot of outside investment, and it turns Silicon Valley into what it is.
Basically, outside investment is why Silicon Valley is
what it is
right now, at least.
Right, and there's a massive like unfortunate reality to that too, where like, you know, people are displaced in that scenario too. And like my hope for Inland Empire is that we would have an ecosystem that's really self-generative, you know, and really a place where like, you know, if this does become like a tech hub, or like, you know, warehouse industries come through here, or like jobs really start springing up because there's a labor force here, like they really are owned, operated, created, and controlled by people from here, you know, because I really would like to see like our area like do better and prosper, but I don't want that to be at the cost of like pushing people gentrification, especially like against communities of color and like you know, like lower income communities. Like we just want them to come up, you know, like. And I think to your point, one thing that we say when we talk about Riverside and Inland Empire as a whole is like we say we want to make it an innovation hub in the US, which is like, that just means that whatever's happening here, it's just, there's something happening here in a big way. But I think that one way to kind of do that is with company like co-ops like yours, you know, like it's like showing the model, being the model, showing that it is possible to have this like sort of business structure and thrive and have community growth through it. Like if you see that and then you start to have like
and you have more businesses going like, oh, well, I mean, if they could do it, then I can do it. And then they do it, and they start contributing to community in a big way, whether that's a tech company coming here, a la like an Esri, and being able to give a bunch of money to the community, whether it's sponsoring events or just giving money just generally to the city of Redlands and stuff like that. Something along those lines, where they're a massive $1 billion company, but they still have they understand the community in some shape. Like, obviously, like, they're massive and they're all this stuff, but like,
that's because Jack was actually from Redlands. Like, I mean, he grew up there and he built his business. That's why he chose it. Everybody thought he was crazy for making it in Redlands, because he's like, why build it in the middle of nowhere? Why don't I have to go to Silicon Valley, stuff like that? He's like, I want to give back to my community. That's what I want more entrepreneurs to really do. He's a great example of somebody who created a tech hub, high-paying jobs, but he did it to build out University of Redlands, to build up the economy of Redlands. I'm like, I respect those kinds of entrepreneurial activities.
Yeah, for sure.
Versus, like what you're talking about. It's like external cash flow coming in, but it's like you're doing it because of the interest of the P&L sheet, once again, not as in the interest of growing the Inland Empire. And I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So I think that kind of, like, all that conversation we just had, I think ties in pretty well to two things I want to talk about. So let's kind of turn gears into community a little bit, right? So why do you think that, like, in the Inland Empire as a whole, like, one thing that I've seen a lot is, like, people think that starting a co-op is like this, like, oh, it's like this crazy, distant, like, utopian idea.
Very hippie. Like,
exactly.
Far out
like,
idea,
very far out. Like, what do you think is that mental block that's, like, getting in people's way to really, like, understand what a co-op is, for one, and then just be okay with it?
Interesting. Yeah, because so I honestly didn't really know how the co-op model worked before this whole process, and we've been talking to like a business law firm that is also like a cooperative law firm, and so they were walking us through it, and they were telling us, there's the LLC, there's the cooperative corporation, and then there's so many other, like, models. But when you hear co-op in the US, these are the two that you think of. And typically, I think people have like a mystification about co-ops, or they have this, like, misunderstanding about them, myself included, for a long time, because it's just not like I think on a deep level, it's, like, really against, like, the American spirit of, like, individuality and, like, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like, own your own business. It really is like a 20-headed like business, you know what I mean? Like, there's we have, all of us, there's, like, bosses, like, just owners, you know what I mean? And I think that it's hard for people to get their head around that, or it's hard for people to know, like, how can you have, like, a business without, like, a leader, or, like, somebody making the decisions, or any of that, or maybe it's just the lack of, like, there aren't that many co-ops, like, there's some in the Bay, there's grocery store co-ops, there are, like, collectives that look like co-ops, but they're not true cooperative corporations. But true cooperative corporation has this weird governance structure where it's either everybody's a boss, like a true owner, and that's just weird to people. Like, how do you have 20 people owning,
that's
or there's, like, a board of directors, and then there's, like, a workforce that are also owners, It's really weird, and there's a lot of different adaptations to it, but I think that it's so rigid, like, it's such a weird and, like, alien structure to how we see things in America that I think a lot of people aren't encouraged to look into it, and instead kind of be, like, try to share their LLC and try to look cooperative and try to do things, but ultimately it's always vulnerable to, like, take over, or, like, one person's interest, like, gaining a hierarchy over another one. But I don't really know what people's perceptions of co-ops are, other than, like, it's for hippies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of pushes them away, because they're like, that means you're a commie, you're like whatever, like, they use all these crazy, like, 50s slang words about you and stuff like that. But I think that it really just kind of rubs people the wrong way, They're like, you're trying to, I don't know.
And like I said before, I just think that we need to get away from these old school mindsets of, like, building innovation, building entrepreneurial activities and companies. Like, we need to look at how the current economy works, and, like, it's the same thing. Like, a gig economy is the thing, but we have no legislation really to, like, work with gig economy. It's like these things both benefit people and they also hurt people.
There's massive displacement.
Yes.
Yep.
But the main thing is the conversation needs to come to like, okay, what is the objective of the business? And then talk about different ways you can go about that versus saying that this is automatically out of the equation just because it's seen as like hipster or like a bad way of going about it. It might be a really strategic way actually to build a business.
There is like and this goes all the way back to labor unions too. There is this like really like dedicated mindset to like, that's just not how things work.
Yeah.
Like the amount of times like you hear that is insane, you know, or like this is just how it is, and people are so fixed on the idea that things have to be a certain way because they always are, that they don't know how to think outside it. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like it sounds childish to be like, why does it have to be that way? But it's only because like, you know, we've lived so long being like, this is how it is, that it's hard to imagine anything else. Like it genuinely is. But I really think like as soon as you ask that question, like, can it be different? Like, and you start to really think about it, it becomes obvious. It's like absolutely, like it can. And not only can it, like we have laws and we have like formulas for other alternative models, you know, and the co-op is a legitimate one, you know, and a labor union too. Like a labor union has a big bad reputation right now from a lot of its history throughout, you know, the 70s moving into the 80s until now, you know, but literally like labor unions back in the day, like obviously they gained us like an 8-hour work day and a 40-hour work week, and they contribute to people like lower turnover rates, you know, and like higher pay for people. But we're in a point in time where like the perception of labor unions has been so negative throughout the corporate 80s that like we have to fight against it, but we also have to fight against what it used to look like.
Exactly.
People so much are like, well, this is a labor union, and I'm like, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, and it can serve the needs of our like contemporary problems right now. You know, in fact, it's meant to in a lot of ways. It's meant to be adapted to the times. You know, and like.
I think that people have like this like it's honestly like you talk about like marketing and stuff like that. Like the 80s are so weirdly marketed as this like, oh, it was this massive explosion of growth in the United States. And it's like, sure, like surface level, let's look at that. Let's take a second and look at surface level. What was that growth? You know, that growth was just in like, you think CEO pay, massive like Fortune 10 companies, like those are the ones that just like took off during that time. It made billion-dollar businesses, you know? But you look at the 30s, 40s, and 50s. That during like that time, massive growth in the United States. But the thing was, it was equal growth all around. That's the big difference here. And I think that what happens is like, you have like these people who used to like, you think like the fantasy of like, oh, right out of high school, I got a job and it paid for my house, it paid for my college, and I paid for my kids to go to college. I have all this stuff. That the only reason that is a thing was because of labor unions. Was because of these things that came around at that time that had really strong governance over these corporations and over these businesses to allow for negotiating rights. And it's one of those things where like, oh well, and the joke is like, oh well, you'll never own a home, you'll never do this, you'll never do that. So like millennials, like, you know, and it's like, well, so or like, well, why can't you just go buy a home? I bought my home and all this stuff. It's like, one, things are more expensive. We're not getting paid anywhere nearly as much as you were back in the day. Like you look at the average median income then versus now, with inflation taken into consideration,
market requirements like an education that puts majority of people in debt, which takes years to pay off, and that actually makes it so you can't reinvest into start a Roth IRA. Well, how do I do that if I'm paying off student debt? How am I doing that if I'm barely making my pay? Like it's just there's so many.
It's almost like saying that is like almost as offensive to me as like when people just like, oh, pick yourself up from your bootstraps and try them on. It's like, what where are my bootstraps? Like they're gone, dude.
They're gone.
Yeah,
no,
they're gone.
They've
been gone.
It's a myth. Yeah, it's crazy, you know, like, and I think sometimes I think it's wishful thinking, you know, be like, or like they're imposing their experiences, like this was my experience, it worked out for me, you know, and they never question like why who helped you, you know what I mean, like there's no such thing as pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, like it's always social, it's always communal, and I think that it's just it's a myth when we don't realize that, you know, when we ignore those networks, you know.
I think it's really important to understand one last thing before we switch back to community here, but I think it's important to understand that and Val, you can speak on this, and I think we speak on this a lot because we both are from other countries, not the US. Is there's a huge for some reason here in the United States there's a massive appreciation towards the self. like
Yeah.
the individual, the island.
Yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
have to be the one to do this. You have to be the one to grab yourself and make this happen for you. Whereas with other countries, it's like, how can we come together and help
Yeah.
out each other? And it's this shift that has to happen, and I hope it does happen soon. Where you start again, this all ties back to kind of every point of our conversation so far, where you have to be able to go, I'm doing okay for myself right now.
Yeah.
But are you doing okay for yourself right now?
Yeah,
Like,
for
how
sure.
are you doing? Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
like 10 years ago, like maybe you were in a position that was not where you're at right now. You were in a bad one. So think about it, like, how can I then give back to the person that might be in the situation that I was in, and have him, instead of it taking 10 years to get to where I am, have him 5 years, half
Yeah.
that. And then that person teaches someone to do in 2.5 years, and that person
Yeah, totally.
that's the mentality I think that is happening.
And it's super important, because I think the one thing I honestly hate the most that I get a comment of is like, everybody, like, especially in business school, this tends to be comments like, well, if you want to make a lot of money, just build your own business. Well, first of all, it's not easy to do that. I can put that out there right away. I mean, we're building this venture, and it's not easy to do that. I'm working ridiculous hours so we can just get it going, and it's great. It's growing. But then the other part is, not everybody has to build a business, and let's get away from that. Let's get away from the conversation that every single person needs to be this work crazy hours and build a venture. Like, some people are passionate about it, and that's great. But like, going back to the bottom line, what are you happy about? If you're happy working at a company and you're getting paid $15 an hour and you're able to pay your bills, that's fine. That's fine. Like, you can do that. You don't have to. You don't have to be the person that's trying to make the $1 billion company. And I like that ambition out of everybody, and like, you should strive to do what makes you happy, and if that makes you happy, you strive for it. But let's get away from this disconnect that everybody needs to like work these ridiculous hours to make a paying wage or build a multi-million-dollar company. That's false. And there's only an X amount of companies that can be created. The market doesn't allow for everybody to have a business.
It's true, and I think it is also like this vestige of like the condescension of the worker. Like, it really is like,
That's a really good way to put it.
it's this old mentality of like, you know, workers aren't as valuable, you know, and so it puts this privilege on people that, like, you know, people that are like self-starters are like, you, in order to think of yourself in valuable terms, you have to remove yourself from being somebody who performs labor as much as you can. And I'm over that. I'm like, that's dumb. Like, we all have to work to live, but we shouldn't have to work thinking that we're insignificant because we're workers, or we shouldn't have to work barely making it, you know what I mean? Just because we have to, you know? And I think, you know, I think a lot about like trade jobs, and I think a lot about like good union jobs, you know, and how for so much of my life, you know, I was steered away from it, and people tell me like trade school is like, you know, like everybody says like, you can do better than trade school, or like you can like go to college, and I'm like, that's bullshit, dude. Like, that would have given me a good job. That would have given me a great job, you know.
Trade school is honestly, I gotta say, if you want to make a good wage in the United States and something that cannot be taken by artificial intelligence, you do trade school stuff. The reason why is your plumbers, your electricians are not going to be replaced by like AI. They're not going to be replaced by these things. But unfortunately, service industry will be impacted by it, because if it's anything that's a routine task, and this is the reality, and I hope people really focus on it, because you need to think of 10 years from now and 15 years from now if you're trying to build a career like you were talking about, like making something that you're making money off. You have to look at, unfortunately, what is going to get replaced, because that is it's a brutal conversation. It is going to happen. You can't really fight that change.
Sure.
But then the other part is like, don't put down people that are trying to go to trade school or building, because that's honestly a better economic route for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did marketing for a community college. That was like kind of how I got started in community college at Valley College. That's
okay,
where
cool.
I was, and like, I cannot tell you like how many conversations we had. Like, one of the accounts that me personally I was really involved with was the applied technology division of the community college, which was the trade side of it. Like, it was like, you know, like diesel mechanics, plumbing, welding, all this stuff, electricians. Enrollment was just like crazy down. And it's everywhere in the U.S. That's the thing, is enrollment in trade schools are down, because like, you think like, oh, why go be a plumber, or why go be an electrician or a welder or XYZ? I get my hands dirty when I could go sit at a desk for 40 hours a week and
type.
You know,
totally. Spreadsheets.
And it's like this, like, we, like, first off, I want to say, like, go to trade school, please. Like, the country needs it. Like, the United States actually needs
There's a
trade
deficit
workers. There's a huge
Totally.
deficit in trade workers. And like, don't let anybody put you down for that. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, if you love to get your hands dirty and you love to be hands-on with your work and you find a passion in that, do it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
No,
do it.
it's truly like so unfortunate that we all have to like, if anybody wants to work with their hands, there's this like implicit bias against labor that
Yeah.
even just existentially we have to get over, because we woke up in a place where people are all telling us like, you know, go into tech, you know, go into, you know, medicine. I mean, like all these great industries and stuff like that too,
Yeah.
but nobody's encouraging people like, you know, it's okay to work. Like it's
Yeah.
okay, you know,
Yeah.
like it's a good living, and we need to make living to live, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so let's I love the conversation. Let's shift it back to community in a sense. So I want to get just like a pulse on like how everyone in the union has really been like receiving all the community encouragement.
yeah, really well. Overwhelming a lot, actually. I mean, I don't know if we really knew what was gonna happen. You know, like I think more or less we were getting out there to tell people this is what has happened and this is what was happening. Just because we needed to like validate like this is happening. Don't let them lie to you. You know, like they're really twisting the narrative, but like it's costing us. Like it's costing us like our living. You know, so like this was going on, and people reached out with so much more than just like, you know, like cool, like I hear you, you know, they were like, what can we do for you, you know, or like how can we support this? And a lot of people took it further, you know, like a lot of people even beyond just supporting us or like coming to a pop-up, a lot of people are like turning their own workplaces around a little bit, like bosses too are like starting to, I've heard stories about a boss in town who works like in another cafe, like instantly giving his workers $1 raise and like a $500 bonus, you know, stuff like that, you know, because they're seeing like, oh shit, like people care about the people that they're buying their coffee from, and I need to too, you know, and that somehow feels like support. Like when people take care of their workers, it feels like
It's validating.
it's validating. Yeah, it's validating to see other workers be taken care of, because you're like, that's me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a worker, you know, and I got like a raw deal, you know what I mean? But like the fact that other people would do the right thing and take care of their workers, I'm like, that is so encouraging, and it makes us feel like it's worth it, you know, and it makes us feel like trying anything at all is so much better and so much more important than just taking it on the chin year after year, you know? So yeah, I think we're amazed. I mean, we had people writing us letters, and like customers would check in on us. People have cooked us like meals and stuff
That's
like that.
awesome.
It's crazy.
That's awesome.
It's really awesome. So
Almost like the entire brand was based around the people and not the
Oh,
brand.
it's
huh?
weird how the
Weird how that happened.
yeah, no, it is weird, but like I think the level of kindness people showed us was like wildly unexpected. You know what I mean? Like, and if you're listening, thank you. Like, I can't say thank you enough to any of you. Like, it's really overwhelming.
Yeah, that's honestly, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really cool to hear, and I mean, I started following the Instagram the minute it kind of came up.
Yeah.
Like both me and my wife are just like massive. Like anytime like anything comes up for sale, we're like there. Whether it's like merch,
Thank
whether
you.
it's coffee,
Yeah.
we go to the pop-ups, all that stuff.
Cool.
You know? So it's like we try our best to support it, because we're there for it. You know, like it's,
Yeah.
at the end of the day. I mean, when I was working at a startup in LA for a while, and I was remote 2 days out of the week. And those 2 days, I was working out of Augies.
Yeah.
Out of the Redlands.
Oh yeah.
I would get there super early in the morning.
Yeah.
I would usually have to fight for my favorite seat. And
Yeah.
there was always this guy that was reading the
Absolutely.
newspaper. Oh, I hated it.
Oh yeah, the old, we call them the Breakfast Club. The old dudes.
Yes, dude. They were
Yeah.
always there like at 6
Yeah.
in the morning, right when it opened.
Uh-huh.
So I'd always have to fight for my favorite
Miss you
seat
guys.
next to the charger, so my
Yeah.
laptop wouldn't die.
Yep.
And but when I would be there until my wife got up for work. I would be there until
Yeah.
4:30, and she would come. We'd have a coffee, we'd chat, and then we would bounce home and have dinner.
Yeah. for
Like
sure.
that's just what it was, you
Mhm.
know. And it's like, and you know, the conversations that I have with people at the bar while like my coffee was being made, like that's what I appreciated.
Yeah, for sure.
More than anything.
And we did too. Like
Yeah.
as workers, like, you know, I don't think any of us are much like computer, like sit at a desk type people, you know, so we're drawn to like working with our hands, working with people, you know. And so yeah, it's that you know, like all of this, like, you know, selling stuff online or like trying to do like as soon as Augies was like trying to do more deliveries and stuff, I was like, just don't take me away from the people. Like it is like 90% of my socializing is like
Yeah.
talking to customers, you know.
Yep.
Amen. So, and I will preface this next thing with, you don't have to say anything, but it's just something that has been on my mind, looking at the Instagram and everything like that. But I have a few quotes in here as well. I'm gonna read this verbatim. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people who on your Instagram say things like, when are you gonna stop slandering small business, or they're just making up lies on social media to get support? And these are direct quotes from social media.
Yeah.
So is there anything you want to say? Do you want to speak on that at all? Or I completely understand if you don't want to speak on it, because I have plenty to say.
Yeah.
I did too.
No, I think the whole time, like, it's like, you know, we started noticing like trolls, you know, and people like
And I have another question on that too.
harassing, yeah, which has been like more or less like not enjoyable, but like funny in a way, you know, because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, this internet thing is so removed from reality, and it drives me crazy sometimes. But I'm realizing there's a discourse and a reality to it in itself. But if you let yourself get in it, like, you start feeling like you have to play by the rules, and you have to play by the ways that the logic works within the discourse of social media. And I always step back and I'm like, wait, but this is just fake. Like, we're not lying and we're not slandering. We're just telling the truth. And at the end of the day, they're starting from a different baseline logic than me. And so to try to argue with them isn't gonna work, because we're in different discourses at this point. You know, we're talking about different things, thinking we're talking about the same thing. So if somebody is out there telling us repeatedly like, oh, it's funny that you're lying, you know, I'm like, well, it's funny that we're not. Like, and that's all I'm like, you know, I can say that or I can say nothing, because I don't care. Like, that's a discourse that is much more fake than my material social reality that is right now sucking. Like, it sucks, you know what I mean? So like, I don't have time for whatever you think, because like, I have to focus on like paying my bills, you know what I mean? Like, and the way to pay my bills is I need to hold these people accountable, because they took my ability to pay my bills away from me. So yeah, I don't know. Like, in one hand I'm like, this is fun. On the other hand, I'm like, this is exhausting. You know, like, I don't know.
So kind of touching on that, do you like even go into the comment section anymore, or is it something that you just shy away from?
I think in some of my lower points, I think I have, or not even some of my lower points. Anytime I've seen them, a bot, like, and that's the thing is, they're always anonymous, you know what I mean? And that's always makes me like, if you're not gonna put your name behind what you're saying, like,
behind a laptop screen or a phone, like,
it's like, that's like, okay, like, keep going, like, you know, do your thing. That's fine. You're not really real. You're too anonymous to be real. But sometimes people will say real things about my real friends, like, and that just strikes this like huge nerve in me, where I'm like, I know that person, and like I can't let that slide. You know what I mean? Like, that's just outright lying, and it drives me crazy. But on the other hand, I always have to place that back in the context of like, this is also fake and made up, but my friends' feelings aren't fake and made up. You know what I mean? And like, that's what, like, so yeah, at times I've definitely like hopped on when I felt like I needed to defend somebody, or when something was particularly like just nasty, you know? But other than that, I'm like, I don't know, like, you know, I'm not here to feed them. You know?
No, absolutely. And I would even say that if anybody is talking about like slandering small business, stuff like that, I would happily have a debate with whoever's saying that. And we can talk about the real economics of building a business. And if you really want to go into that, I'll break down how your logic literally makes no sense. So, so at the end of the day, like, you can say what you want to say, but usually it might come from an unsophisticated thought process that you don't even understand how to, like, if you're a business owner, sure, you might have some stake in what you're saying. But if you're not even a business owner and you're just talking about just to talk about it, just to create a point, why? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So
and even for me, without like attacking somebody's credentials, or even like, I don't need to like apply like some generic logic to be like, you're wrong and I'm right objectively. I'm like, I just don't, like, we're coming from different places. We're not gonna agree. Keep going. Like, you know, I don't care. So.
That's all you can do. I mean, so one thing I want to talk about, because and I'll kind of start this conversation a little bit, because I think I want to give my 2 cents on it. Before anything. So one thing I started noticing right around the time that, and I'm gonna speak in very legalese kind of supposed, my opinion kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right around the time that supposedly Augie's got the PR kind of firm behind them for the rebranding and kind of goodwill push and everything.
Yeah.
Supposedly when they got hired, you started seeing these like accounts in droves coming into the comment sections. Specifically one that stands out more than anything, and I think you know who I'm referring to.
Oh yeah. It's my favorite one.
Yeah, and I think you know who I'm referring to. It's like, and like looking into it, I remember like first time seeing the account, I was like, no, I don't know about this. Like I started looking, I was like, this is just like anger. Like this is coming from like a really weird place, you know? To the point where, and then I saw the account before I knew about them getting the PR firm and all that stuff. Before I saw your posts.
Yeah.
But then looking at it, it's like, it's so weird. Just so there's two realities that exist here in my head, right? Reality number one is, that account has nothing to do with the PR firm. And that is so sad if that's the case.
Sure.
Because like, come on, if you really think about it, like it's like someone who is like involved but doesn't want to be involved and wants to create this like anonymity for themselves,
right? And
wants to say what they want to say, but they don't want to have any of the pressure blown towards them. Or it is the PR firm that created all these bot accounts. That's then pushing out misinformation and pushing out this sort of negative discourse in the comment sections, and that is just stupid. Like both cases are idiotic in my opinion. Like one's just sad, and one's just really stupid.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, there's this like the commonality between those two is like it feels desperate. You know what I mean? Like, and it really does. And I think either way, like I have no idea. Like it could be. I haven't really thought about it. To be honest, like I haven't really read all the comments that much. Like me and the other people that run.
I was getting angry. Just like,
I know.
Like
I'll get texts from friends, you know, like because a lot of our friends like outside the union will like go to bat really hard, you know, and I'm like, you don't have to. Like we're spiritually strong and advanced. Like we don't need to engage. You know what I mean? But like if you want to, go ahead. That's totally cool. But yeah, sometimes when they hit me up and they're like, yo, like this person's unhinged, you know, and I think about it, I'm like, who is it? Someone I know? Is it like I cannot believe that it's somebody hired. Like that one is a little bit more far out there than me, because the idea of hiring a firm to create an anonymous account to harass people is like, you're gonna spend money on that? Like this is what the consultants, like the professionals do to try to like protect your reputation. Like that's a little far-fetched for me to believe, because the consulting firm is doing things like protecting people like O.J. Simpson. Like they try to salvage careers, you know what I mean? And like this is not how you salvage a career, but maybe they're just bad at what they do, you know? Otherwise, I'm like, it's just a friend of the family or a worker or something, you know? In which case, like, maybe someday we can laugh about it, you know? Like maybe we'll look back and be like, you know.
That's honestly, I think, the most high road response that you could take to it. Like, just look back and just kind of laugh about it one day.
Yeah,
you know?
the tone of it sometimes reminds me of a couple people that I know, and I'm like, I wonder if it is this person. In which case, like, someday I would just like to be like, you tried really hard, and I couldn't care less, and like, let's just put it behind us, you know. But otherwise, I'm like, I'll probably never know, and I don't really need to.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that. Being authentic is always going to win. So you can try to push the reputation of somebody down, but like if they're authentic and what they're saying is true, that would always trump whatever else somebody's trying to do. So like I think that's the important part, is like everything you guys are doing is so authentic, and it comes from like the bottom of your guys' hearts, and you're really articulating what is happening versus anything else. And I think that's the important part, that nobody can discredit that. Yeah, and that's the big difference, you know, is like when there's like nothing to hide, and two, when like everything we're doing and saying is literally just our circumstances are making this our reality, and we're just confronting it publicly. You know what I mean? And like it's there's just a level to, you know, to speak to like being genuine is like we have no other choice. Like, you know, like we can't like be clever to navigate our way through this. It's like, this is what's happening just in front of everybody, you know? And it's it's hard to like, you know, navigate that a little bit, but it really is just like, we're just out here trying to make it, you know, like no tricks,
no lies, just trying to make it, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's commendable, honestly. Like, taking a very, like in every way, shape, and form, like a very shitty situation, and turning it into, and using it as fuel, honestly, to turn around and then say, okay, we're gonna do our own thing, and we're gonna do it the way that we wanted it to be done, or the more idealized version of what we wanted. Originally, but then, you know, circumstances put us in a situation where now we have to do it on our own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's really, like, honestly, for me, that's like all the talking points that we had kind of talked about at this point. If anything, do we want to push into the failure story?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here is I think the takeaway that anybody who's listening, I really want them to understand is that we need to have conversations about these things. This is not something that can, if your opinion is coming from things you see on the news and all these kinds of things, it's skewed. Talk to somebody who's in a union. Talk to somebody who's not in a union. Talk to a business owner. Understand perspectives, and let's have conversation. Like, let's go back to the old school ways, and like, let's have social media not create the mindset for people, and talk to other people with different opinions. It'll grow your own opinion and understand your own biases and,
absolutely,
and these things. So
have an uncomfortable conversation. It's important.
And be open-minded about it. Don't try to close it out just because you disagree. Listen to them out. Understand why they're coming from that point of view, and just talk about it. You might not come to an agreement at the end of the conversation. That's perfectly fine. That's how we are as human beings. So.
Totally.
So I think that's important. But I think that's the main takeaway from this whole conversation is really just let's have these conversations and let's understand what's really going on instead of just being covered up by different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
But the way that we like to end this show in general is one thing we really want to strive for anybody, whether they're a worker, an entrepreneur, they're an athlete, everybody goes through failure in their life. And a lot of times we tend to glorify success, but there's a lot of things that happen until success can be created. So the final question I have for you is do you have a failure story you'd like to share, and some like lessons learned that came out of it?
Yeah, for sure. So for the record, I forgot about this segment before coming on the show, and so moments before we started, I was like thinking through infinite amount of failure that I faced in my life, and I was like, which one is worth telling? But I think that this story is worth telling, because even as we're talking about it, like we're still, like, our union group is still in a sense in a mode of failure, you know what I mean? And like, we're only sort of coming out of failure and able to keep pushing through like a failed experience by our community. And there's a ton of lessons in that, but basically, like, being fired felt like a failure. You know what I mean? Like, we were like, this is gonna work, we're gonna save jobs, we're gonna better our workplace, we're gonna make the business more profitable. Like, it's gonna be great. And being fired, like, it not a failure in a sense like that we miscalculated or we did something wrong. You know, it was just like, this did not go the way we wanted it to at all, and we've been spending 3 months struggling because of it. And the lessons are probably too many to account for right now, but like the biggest one is like sticking together, like literally, you know, like I think most of the time, like, if I had a teacher that was like, you know, like, if you fail, get back up and try again, and you'll make it eventually. I'm like, that places such an impetus on the individual effort, you know, but like, really the only reason why this wasn't an utter failure, like why we've been able to move forward, is community support and the social bonds that we've built within our coworkers, you know. And I think that only comes from like admitting, like coalescing around failure, you know, like really embracing failure and not running from it or being ashamed or like giving into it, you know, but being like, yeah, we failed. Let's figure it out and talk about it and embrace the fact that like now we're losing. Like, how do we get out of this place? And I think that there was a big feeling to want to walk away. You know, I think at first, I think a lot of us were like, okay, like, turn the page, you know, like, how do we like deal with this individually, and how do we like get our lives to move on? And, you know, I think realizing like we have to try, like, this isn't right, you know, like we've been dealt like a failure, and we have to right this, and the only way we can do that is if we decide to do it together. So yeah, I think I love this segment a lot because literally everything is just failing and moving forward and failing. And I think the more we learn to think about that in terms of like a community and like these networks of embracing like, okay, we're always negotiating failure. Like we're always just dealing with and mitigating like the lasting effects of failure. I really think like we can have a better perspective on what success itself looks like, you know?
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. Wonderful. Honestly, like I could not agree more.
Cool. And I got to avoid some more personal failures through that story. So
oh, don't worry, we'll get you on that next time.
Perfect. Great.
Okay, so I mean, as of right now, we're going to cut to a little splash screen. We're going to set up for our next segment, which is overrated, underrated. Yep. So we're just going to put a little splash screen up. We're still going to be on. So please, if you're with us, please don't go just yet. If you do have to go, because I know we've been recording for now hour and 15. So if you have something to do, just make sure you follow us. Make sure you follow Augies Union. I think Augies Union on everything, right?
Yeah.
So Augies Union, at Augies Union on all social media platforms. That's which platforms are you on right now?
Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Mostly Instagram though.
Mostly Instagram.
Yeah.
And then make sure you follow Free Logic Media, Instagram. No Twitter just quite yet. Facebook, LinkedIn if you have it. If you want to get more the businessy side, networky side of what we do. Yes, and if you want, I'm the producer here, is telling me to subscribe to our Apple Music, our Spotify, listen to the podcast, download it, listen to it while you work out or clean or do whatever you do. Please, I'm sure our sweet voices are exactly what you need while you're trying to get some PRs, you know?
Absolutely. And just a quick thing for next week, we're going to have our next guest is Noah McGinty. His organization is called Bridging the Gap, and we're going to be talking heavily more on like mental health and providing opportunities for a community to really strive forward. So a lot of conversation about community.
Up. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll be tuning in.
Absolutely. Sounds good. But yeah, we can do a little splash screen, and then we're going to get straight into the over and under. We got nothing. We're just going to do a lot. We're live.
Yeah, so just switch.
Oh, might as well.
Okay, might as well. You guys see how the sausage is made right now. All right, we're going to move some stuff around.